A lot of times when we're developing a brand, there is no identity. And so we have to build the identity. How do I do that? How do I move forward? How do I evolve or connect or kind of challenge that brand? We use archetypes. So really defining your archetype helps you build on your brand identity. That is the core essence. That is the foundation. How do we then identify our own archetype? Hello, and welcome to the Brand Therapist Podcast with your host, Yamilka Rodriguez. I'm super excited about today's topic. We're going to talk about unveiling your brand's recognition. What are the steps? How do we do that? But also, we're going to go deep into how to think about character, how to think about what this podcast name is, which is brand therapy. So imagine your brand as a patient seeking a transformative treatment for the growth plan of the company. And in today's competitive market, it's really difficult to get your brand across. So really developing this understanding will give you kind of a strategic approach to unlocking that full potential. So we're going to start with what are the challenges? So lack of brand identity. A lot of times when we're developing a brand, there is no identity. And so we have to build the identity. This is why we use archetypes. It's really to build an identity for yourself. Now, I'm not saying we're going to build an identity that is different than who you are, but using archetypes help us build a brand that's consistent and that we can evolve over time. The second one is the disconnection from the audience. So a lot of times when we're building a brand or a brand identity, we lack that connection to our audience, right? Or to our client. And so as you build your identity, you need to understand what are your clients' needs so you can develop strategies for those specific needs. The third one is inconsistent in the brand messaging. So as I work with clients, I noticed that they write these posts or emails that don't have either a tone of voice or a sort of story that they're trying to tell. So focusing on your message and knowing what your message is all about isn't just for marketing purposes, but it's also for you to connect to your customer and create ideas that you don't have to think about so much because you're always staying within your messaging strategy. The fourth one is unclear mission and vision. Now, a lot of times I have tons of clients and we always start with mission and vision. And sometimes they say, well, I already have a vision, I already have a mission. But if you really think about it, it's not tied to who they are or what their brand is all about. So it's great that you have a mission and vision. And if you do, look at it and see if your personality is part of that mission and vision. Okay, so now let's talk about the treatment plan. So as we think about brand therapy and you're talking to your brand therapist and you're defining your audience, your message, your identity, a clear mission and vision, then let's start with the treatment. What are we doing and how are we doing this? So there's 3 simple steps to brand recognition. The first one is defining our core essence. Okay, so that kind of goes hand in hand with identity. Defining that underlying core essence is the most important thing to start building a brand. If you know what that is, then you just stick to that strategy and you'll see how amazing your brand is going to start to develop. Now, a lot of us are like, well, like, how do I do that? How do I move forward? How do I evolve or connect or kind of challenge that brand? We use archetypes. So really defining your archetype helps you build on your brand identity. That is the core essence. That is the foundation, because it's going to give us our mission, vision, and values. It's going to really give us our tone of voice, our character. It's going to define our messaging. That is the core essence of where we begin. And the second one is crafting your brand superfan, right? So I always start with understanding our brand, whether it's a company or a persona brand, and then we go into superfan. And I don't mean like your strategic target or your competitive set. I mean the person, that individual that loves everything that you do. That's why we call them super fans, right? Or the super fan, singular. So really creating and crafting that persona, understanding their pitfalls, what they're afraid of, what their frustrations are, what are they proud of, what's their day like, what car do they drive, where do they work, like putting these elements together. You don't have to have a specific person. You can have somebody in mind that you think, is kind of the quintessential essence or the piece that ties everything together for your brand. But writing this down, visualizing, putting it together, crafting it is going to be great for not just you, but the people who work under you, the people who help you build your everyday brand. So that is one of the most important things, and that is step 2. Step 3 is your messaging architecture. I see a lot of clients that don't have an understanding of what their messaging architecture is, right? So what's the baseline of that? How do we go into each of the different spaces where we're trying to communicate? And actually, for the next solo episode, I'll go specifically into messaging architecture so you can understand how that can help your business stand out. So being consistent with our messaging, understanding our tone of voice, understanding what each piece of our message, where it goes and where it should be developed. How do we focus on it? How we do the full circle of 360 touch points with our customer, and understanding how each of these messages is going to integrate into their everyday life. So now that we've talked about the treatment plan, let's talk about the treatment method. So we're going to explore the human drivers. And I've kind of gone into that a little bit about how do we then identify our own archetype in our own persona is through understanding the human driver. There's 4 major human drivers. 1 is belonging, the opposite of belonging, which is number 2, is independent. Then we have stable, which is 3, and then we have dynamic, which is 4. And there's no rhyme or reason to these. Maybe 1 is dynamic, 2, right? It's just that there's 4 major drivers. And when you do the quiz and you go to bespokebranding.io and you take the quiz, what will be there are the 4 major drivers. So when we look at the major drivers and we go to the quiz, it's really important to pick one, okay? And I get a lot of people who say, well, I'm a mix of this and maybe this. That's thinking too much. Don't let your brain take over when you're really focusing on this quiz. Let your intuition kind of take over and figure out which one of those four are the major driver for human behavior. Your major driver, right? Is it independent? Is it dynamic? Is it stable? Is it belonging? And once you find your primary, this is where all the work starts. Now, there is a secondary, and we can look into all of that. But when we are beginning this journey, it's really, or this treatment, is really important to focus on one and really fully understand it. Use that as your driver, and then continue forward to your secondary. Let's talk about each of the different drivers. We have belonging. What is belonging about? Belonging is about making that connection. That means our primary driver is about relationships, about connection, about connecting with people. The opposite of belonging is independence. What is independence about? It's forging our own path, more about curiosity, achievement, simplicity. That's what independence is about. Stable, if it's our primary driver, it's all about, the word itself says it, stability, rigor, analysis. And then the last driver is dynamic. That's when it's about having fun or transformation or, having a full idea and being flexible around what that can be. So those are the four major drivers of human behavior, and we select one of those, and then we have each of those different axes have three archetypes, and each of the archetypes then are revealed as we go through a quote. And a quote might seem not relevant, but the whole point of taking the quiz is for you not to put your head too much into it. So when you look at the three quotes, you're kind of like, it's this one, or it's this one. Oh, maybe I'm between this one and this one, but I think it's this one. And that's really what it's about. And then your archetype is revealed. What I don't want is for you to think through each of these, because that purpose is to really settle into it, intuitively know what your primary archetype is. So what might be some of the outcomes? Well, it is about transforming your brand's health and vitality, right? We're on this metaphor of treatment, and what we really want is for your brand to succeed, to be healthy, to be amazing, to be empowering. And that's really what we're striving for. But before we go into outcomes, I really want to read this passage from the book, The Hero and the Outlaw, where all this journey came about. The writers of this book is Margaret Mark and Carol S. Pearson. Carol S. Pearson is one of my heroes. I love her theory, how she thinks about archetypes. It's really incredible. But I want to talk about beyond market segmentation, beyond stereotyping, because I want to make sure that we understand that it's not necessarily about stereotyping, but about building an identity. So even more important, because most people in the field of marketing do not understand archetypes, and because they think in terms of market segmentation, they have an unfortunate tendency to reduce to archetypes and to stereotypes. For instance, imagine a high-achieving executive. She ordinarily might be attracted to ads for ruler products, which reinforce her sense of status or power and help her make her mark in the world. Reading an airline magazine, she might perk up at an ad that offers her a more effective planning calendar and an innovative computer program, or a power suit. While a variety of products might help her achieve and maintain power or just feel powerful, and will signal their appeal to her in the underlying symbolism of regal power, status, and control. If marketers think in terms of market segments, it may be tempting to stereotype such a person, mentality confining her to a very narrow motivation and category. So we just kind of defined a ruler archetype here. And so when we build the ruler type, it's not that it's incorrect or wrong what is in here. It's that there's not enough depth to really fully understand what she's proud of, what are her frustrations, and that's what should drive the idea of the market ad, not necessarily the stereotypical specifics that we drive through these. Now I want to read one more paragraph. However, if we realize that she's a full human being, right, that it isn't difficult to recognize that from time to time she might feel trapped by her high power life. Like many of us, she may be working so hard that she has begun to feel too driven. Every human being has a basic desire to achieve, and the desire may have taken over her life. In addition, we all have a need for pleasure and adventure. Our executive might not even be conscious of this sense of yearning or the need for balance. Yet, despite this lack of awareness, she is suddenly attracted by advertising images that connote freedom. So, thinking about how we get into the mind of our customer, what is that psychological drive? What is that understanding of how we can really integrate what we put out as content to attract these specific superfans through the understanding of archetypical characters. And so really knowing and understanding, it's going to give you a language that you can share with your creative team or with your team in general, or it's going to give you a kind of a book or ideas to pursue as you are building your brand. And then there's no questions. What happens is a lot of times we're doing this at an unconscious level. And doing that on an unconscious level doesn't help us build on our brand. Our brand needs to be developed with an understanding and a conscious set of rules and regulations, or they don't even have to be called that, but kind of a set of strategies that help you develop the brand and evolve the brand to its highest level. And that's what I love. Really understanding how then you can build experiences in the love of your brand and extend and expand your brand to grow in this beautiful space of success. So, what are the outcomes? The outcomes are enhanced recognition and differentiation with a clear brand identity, right? That's really what you want. Bridge gaps with your audience through aligned messaging and offering, right? Understanding that will help you deliver the right message. Ensure consistency to improve clarity, credibility, and consumer trust. I always talk about consistency because consistency helps us continue and deliver a brand that people will trust. Align teams and stakeholders with compelling mission and vision. So we talked about this. If you do have a mission and vision, does it incorporate your character? And if it does, great, amazing. But if it doesn't, how would you do that to have a compelling mission and vision that tells your story and your brand story? So thank you so much for joining us today on The Brand Therapist, and I will see you on the next show.